my agenda is a little bit about my story and how we got here, how I got here, a little bit about lipedema from a patient's perspective, and about the Lipedema Project and what's happened and some of the reach that it's had, and the kinds of things that are being done. We've had symposiums, there's research happening, and various other things. So I like this quote by Rumi. It says, you know how it is. Sometimes you plan to go in a particular direction, and life has other plans, basically. I did not expect to be standing here. I did not expect to be living a life that has so much to do about lipedema. So how did I get here? I struggled with weight. At puberty, I had a weight gain. I thought it was puberty. At pregnancy, I had more weight gain. I thought it was pregnancy. When I hit menopause, I'll talk about it. But so the way that I learned to manage the situation is I weighed and measured my food without exception. I carried a scale with me. I was in a self-help group. And I learned to love plant-based. I was very happy. I was thin. And I thought I had walked away from the problem of obesity. I said, this is it. I know how to manage it. I had a great exercise program, and it lasted for almost 25 years when menopause hit, or more accurately, perimenopause. It was not hilarious, and it wasn't a celebration. It was a very, very difficult time. I began to gain weight, and I started to do everything that I could, which, given the lifestyle that I had, there wasn't much room. But anyway, I did what I could, and what ended up happening is I had complications. I ended up developing a rather severe cyst condition. I had 5 surgeries from 2009 to 2011, so I had 5 surgeries in 2 years. They did excisions, because I had been obese, they did skin reduction. So what no one knew is that I had lipedema. And because no one knew I had lipedema, I ended up with severe complications. Complications where I had uncontrollable swelling, and no one could tell me what was going on. Not only could they not tell me what was going on, there wasn't a lot of, well, let's see if we can figure this out. It was, oh, you're overweight. At that point, I was overweight, not obese. And I learned of something in the world that I had never named before, called weight stigma and anti-fat bias. And being a researcher, I started to look, and I found a lot of research on it. Basically, it's highly prevalent. It's highly prevalent in all aspects of someone's life. Obesity does not necessarily is not necessarily a comorbidity of lipedema, but it does tend to come together in about 50 to 70% of the cases. But as you can see from these researchers, in healthcare, it's as prevalent as it is anywhere else in our society. There was a study done at Harvard that looked at implicit cognition. Essentially what it means is we can say, oh no, I'm not prejudiced. Oh, I don't have that. But there's an internal response that is culturally endemic, which means that sitting in front of a doctor, looking overweight or obese and saying, you don't understand, I am not overeating. I am exercising. Not only am I exercising and eating well, I'm doing everything right by the book, and my body hurts. This is not only what I said, but many, many, many women talk about going and trying to get help and being told, oh, come back when you've lost X, Y, or Z. So my surgeon said, this is after 5 surgeries, having never said that weight was an issue, after the 5th surgery, and I was having uncontrollable swelling, which turned out to be surgically induced lymphedema with underlying lipedema, and I was headed towards a wheelchair. My physical therapist said, had I not done what I did, that I would 2 years ago have been in a wheelchair. So I feel very, very blessed to be standing here. So I'm a professor, and I teach not only leadership development, but I do advising, and I help students with their theses. And I had this as my screen, my screen share. And one night I was talking to the students about them being passionate about what it was that they were going to be focusing their thesis on. And I looked at it and I said to myself, holy cow, what would I attempt to do if I knew I could not fail? And it was at that point that I was dealing with all these issues. And I can remember the exact moment where I was sitting on my couch. I had been crying for weeks. I had been feeling powerless, helpless, ineffective. I had been back to the surgeon so many times, and he had basically fired me. He had said to me that I was bullying him because I was asking too many questions. And I remember thinking to myself, I have a choice. I have one of 2 directions. I can continue to bitch and moan, I can continue to feel helpless, or I can make a decision to do something else. And it was at that point that I just said, there's got to be an answer. And if there's an answer, I'm going to find it. So I found the answer. So through a weird series of events, I found out more. Of course, I did a lot of research. I'm a researcher. I found out about lymphedema. I started to try and get treatment for lymphedema. I ended up with a wonderful lymphedema therapist in Boston. We worked. I got reduction, and then I reached a point where I couldn't get any more reduction. That was it. It wasn't going away. So I was on the pump, and I asked my therapist, is there anything I can read about this while I was on the pump in therapy? And she handed me Foldy's textbook. And I read through, and you don't read her textbook, by the way. It's very, very dense. I sort of, went through it, and somehow I ended up on the chapter on inflammation, and then right after the chapter on inflammation is the chapter on lipedema. And God knows why I read it, but I read it. When I read the chapter on lipedema, it was like a checklist where I could go check, 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 check. My therapist came back in and I said, Melissa, I don't think I just have lymphedema. I think I have lipedema. And she looked at me and she said, oh my God, I think you're right. And so that started the journey for me. So I went online, I did more research, I found out about a lymphoscintigraphy. It took almost 4 months for me to get it scheduled. I finally got it scheduled, and my primary care called me at 9 o'clock at night to tell me that I'd had a pretty bad compromised lymphatic system. And so at that point I said, wait, I think I don't just have lymphedema, I think I have something called lipedema. My primary care said to me, how exciting. I said, what do you mean, how exciting? I'm telling you, I have an incurable disease that nobody knows anything about. You don't even know anything about it. He said, we've been trying to find an answer for years. I had been working with him. We had looked at this unspecific edema. And so he said, well, you're going to have to help me help you. So I put up a website. This is how Lipedema Simplified was born. I had to organize the data because there was so much data. He said, send me an email. At that point, I had something like 130 articles. I said, I think that would be too much, so I organized it into Lipedema Simplified. Through having the website, I got contacted by someone in the UK, and they said, we're having the first gathering of women. Women are coming together who have lipedema. It was in November 2012, and I said, I can't go to England for the weekend. That's crazy. How am I going to go to England for the weekend? So I went to England for the weekend. And I met a group of women who talked and sounded and looked like what I was looking for. And it's a little quote that said, find your tribe, love them hard. It was a group of women that I could relate to. There was, most of the women were from the UK. There were about 50 of us. There was me from the US and one woman from Australia who was on her way to Germany to have surgery. And we spent the weekend starting to talk about what it would be like to get movement. When this all happened, I would go around, I went around my apartment and I said, nobody's gonna care about fat legs. You know, fat is despicable. For whatever reason, fat is the one thing that is customarily okay to be discriminated against. I still haven't figured out why, but it's rampant. And I'm like, nobody's gonna care about fat legs. I put up the website for my doctor so he could figure out how to help me. And each year, the website got more and more hits. So I put it up in 2012. In 2013, there were 13,000 hits for the entire year. In 2014, in September, there were 12,000 hits to the website, and by the end of the year, there were over 50,000 hits. And then in 2015, there were 50,000 hits, but we put up 2 other websites. So between the 2 other websites, the Lipedema Project website got 25,000 hits, and the disease they call fat got 30,000 hits. So in 1 year, there was well over 1,000 hits on the website. I put it up for my doctor. So, painful fat disease. The one thing that I said and the one thing that women have said so many times is, you mean it's not my fault. Society, the healthcare system, if you're overweight, it's your fault. That's what they tell you, that's what you learn to believe. In the US, there are 17 million women with lipedema. It can be inherited, it's almost exclusively in women. Some men have it who have hormonal disorders. It's asymmetrical, accumulation of fat. And here's the thing, it progresses, which means is if you don't know about it and you continue to do what it is that you know that they tell you to do, it's not going to keep you any healthier, and it's also not going to prevent the thing that I have the most fear about, which is immobility. And so in Sweden, there are over 4 million women in Sweden. That's from your population. And there's almost over 500,000 women who have lipedema who don't know that they have it. So a couple of weeks ago, I was contacted by this television show. They did a show on lipedema. This woman right here has lipedema, and they couldn't guess it. They guessed lymphedema. Let me say that most women with lipedema are misdiagnosed with lymphedema if they're diagnosed at all. Again, what I want to impress is that it's progressive. This is a picture that stage 1, 2, and 3, but stage 4 can get very severe. This is a stage 4, and this is a stage 4. This is a combination of lipo lymphedema, which is the combination of lipedema and lymphedema, which is what the disease progresses to in its advanced stages. So, it was first named at the Mayo Clinic by Drs. Allen and Hines, and it was published in 1940. Here's the original publication, which means how come for 75 years nothing happened? Anti-fat bias is in the healthcare system as well as it is in society. And the bottom line of the Hippocratic Oath is do no harm. And in a lot of cases, unless we patients learn how to advocate for ourselves, which means to talk to our healthcare providers in such a way and with such knowledge that they can understand that there is, in fact, a disorder that we're dealing with. So this is my partner in healthcare. This is Dr. Carmody. He's my primary care physician, and he's a professor at Harvard Medical School, which helped. And every step of the way, he was supportive of me in this process and really creating what's now the Lipedema Project. This was a group of us at the Foldy Clinic, and out of that year, we had a number of things happen. The Lipedema Project was born. So it is a collaboration with Dr. Smith. He is the director of the Friedman Center, as well as the chief of plastic surgery at Mount Sinai, Beth Israel, which is one of the largest healthcare systems in the US. Our purpose is to create transmedia programs to raise awareness, to educate and support research in all aspects of lipedema. And so this is a group of the Lipedema ladies in 2014. And so one of the campaigns that we ran was a manifesto, which says that tell other women, it's not our fault, it's a disease. It's not just because we're up in the middle of the night eating bonbons. Not true. And we had t-shirts made, and these were posted all over the internet in all the different countries. So the disease they call FAT is the final product of the documentary. It was released last year. It's available online. It's available on DVD in a number of different languages, subtitled. And it will be available on iTunes and Amazon in the next month or two. So we had the first international symposium on lipedema last year, right about a year ago today, almost. Today's the 15th? Yep, so it's been a year ago. So the symposium was put together to review the current body of knowledge on lipedema. There was a film premiere and reception. There was a forum, a solutions forum for women, and there was a think tank that had a group of 36 clinicians, researchers, scientists, therapists, surgeons, and lipedema advocates. Professor Foldy was our keynote speaker, and we had a full group of over 200, and Dr. Smith, Tilly Schmidt put up the first website on lipedema. She's from the Netherlands. Professor Foldy, Dr. Carmody, Dr. Roxon is one of the top influencers. He's from Stanford Medical Center, and he's done a lot of work on lymphatic disease. Dr. Rapprich from Germany, and a group of surgeons who are all discussing how we can know better about the long-term outcomes of liposuction. The think tank was a group looking at how do we understand lipedema. So we had a pre-think tank survey where people said, this is what we know, this is what we need to know. Essentially, we need to know what the etiology is, what causes lipedema, and then we need to know what's going to cure it. And then we came up with 5 areas that we need to research. Issues around the tissue itself. What can we know about the adipose tissue? The fat tissue is different. It doesn't metabolize. Why? The diagnostic criteria. Right now, there is no exam that someone could say, like an MRI, where we can say you have lipedema. It's a histological, so it's history. how do we know we create centers of excellence throughout the world on lipedema? And what's the genetics? You know, there's a genetic component, we know it's inherited. And what about outcomes? Outcomes meaning we know that liposuction works, but are there other things as well? So, there's also, we just launched CME online courses. In the US, physicians need to have continuing medical education credits. So this is courses that physicians can take in order to get those credits, but it's also available to anyone. So one of the things we've been advising women to do when you see your doctors, you can give them this website. And so the CME courses are free. The hospital and Dr. Smith sponsored this so that they're free. In addition, there's 2 other courses not free, but one is an introduction to lipedema, and the other one is solutions about therapy, treatment, and what you can do for it. There's a growing acceptance of in healthcare in the US. There was a conference last weekend, Dr. Stutz spoke at that conference, that was put on by Fat Disorders Research Society, and they had, what did you say? You said 265. 265 with lipedema and Derkums. So they were really looking at both. There's the Lymphatic Education and Research Network is a foundation, and they have sponsored 4 fellowships with researchers. So they're beginning to do that kind of research. Dr. Herbst, who's a fat disorder specialist in the US, she's the only one, but she's just been funded by, and she's created a center. She just was funded $1.5 million for lipedema and Derkums research. And the second international symposium is being planned for next summer in London. We wanted to make it closer so that it would be available for more people in Europe. So it's June 14th and 15th. And I just want to say that what's happened is this tribe effect. It's that women who have lipedema are finding a voice. We are finding a voice, and we're finding a voice all over the world. Here in Sweden, there's 2 organizations. In the Netherlands, in Germany, in the UK, in Australia, in the US. And these are just a few of the organizations where women are coming together, supporting each other, and looking for support from healthcare. So I want to bring this to a close by just talking a little bit about the ambassador program. The ambassador program grew out of women wanting to help one another. And so there's ambassadors at this point in many of the different countries. So this is the US, this is here in Sweden. Margareta is our ambassador. I don't know, she disappeared. And that's Heather, and that's her blog. Her blog is called Lady in a Fat Suit. And she was writing about going to see a doctor and having a doctor respond by saying, please do not confuse your Google search with my medical degree, which is another way that physicians can often respond about when we go in with information. So this is the Foldy Clinic. We're moving forward, and as I was leaving Hinterzarten yesterday, Professor Foldy was so excited because she came and she showed me this strawberry. The strawberry she got in a tray of strawberries that a patient had given her was growing, can you see the little bush here? It's growing a new plant. And so we decided we were going to take it as a sign that the new thing that is arising is the work with lipedema. And so these are the 2 questions we have up in the lab. What causes lipedema and what can cure lipedema? And what we've said is, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So we're hoping to get to the point where we can understand it and cure it. Okay, thank you.